Sophia Reynolds sat quietly in seat 23C, tucked between a business traveler on her left and a young college student on her right. To anyone watching, she was just another passenger, dressed in jeans, a pale sweater, and worn-in sneakers. Her auburn hair was tied back into a ponytail, and a small backpack rested beneath the seat in front of her. Nobody would have guessed that this calm, almost ordinary woman had logged more than 2,000 hours in some of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. For 18 relentless months, Sophia had been flying combat missions across hostile regions, protecting skies few civilians would ever set eyes on. Her unit had been stationed in tense zones over Eastern Europe and the Middle East, where adversary fighters regularly tested NATO airspace. More than once, Sophia had been seconds from a life-or-death dogfight, her steady nerves and sharp instincts pulling her squadron back from the brink. She was respected, even envied, within her branch of the Air Force. Yet today, no one on board this commercial airliner knew any of that. For once, she was not in uniform. She was not wearing her helmet, not bracing against the deafening roar of an afterburner. She was just a woman traveling home, heading back to see her family in California. She had finally accepted her long-delayed leave, trading a cockpit filled with warning tones for a quiet transatlantic flight on United Airlines, Flight 981, bound for New York. The aircraft hummed gently at 37,000 feet, the steady drone of the engines so soothing compared to the violent skies she was used to. Passengers around her fell into the usual routines of a long-haul journey. The businessman flipped between slides on his laptop, muttering about deadlines. A family with 2 young children tried to calm their toddler with snacks and cartoons. An older couple, clearly tourists, dozed off beneath a shared blanket. To them, Sophia was invisible, just another weary traveler. And in a way, that was exactly what she wanted. The captain's voice came over the intercom, crisp and relaxed. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Robert Mitchell speaking. We're cruising at 37,000 feet, with smooth skies ahead. Our estimated arrival into JFK is just over 7 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." Sophia leaned her head against the headrest, exhaling softly. She had tucked a paperback novel into her bag, but found herself too tired to open it. Months of back-to-back missions had taken a toll on her body. The only thing she wanted was to close her eyes and let the steady rhythm of the engines lull her into a rare moment of peace. For 3 hours, peace is exactly what she had. The cabin dimmed as shades were drawn, and conversations faded into quiet murmurs. Flight attendants moved softly up and down the aisles, offering drinks and meals. For the first time in months, Sophia felt her mind ease. She wasn't watching radar screens, calculating fuel reserves, or waiting for enemy aircraft to cross invisible borders. She was just human again. But peace rarely lasts. The first sound came like a whisper, a faint whine cutting through the drone of the engines. Most ears on board were too untrained to notice, but Sophia's instincts caught it instantly. Her eyes snapped open, scanning the cabin. The noise grew sharper, more distinct, a sound she had learned to recognize in countless hours of training. Incoming missile. Her chest tightened. Passengers kept reading, sleeping, chatting. They hadn't heard it. They couldn't know what was about to happen. And then the world shook. The explosion tore through the left engine with a violent roar, shoving the plane sideways. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as screams filled the cabin. Flames streamed past the windows, debris spinning away into the endless sky. People cried out in panic, fumbling with their masks, clutching one another as the realization struck. They were under attack. Sophia's heart raced, but her training was faster. She inhaled deeply through the mask, grounding herself in procedure. She scanned the cabin. The attendants were scrambling, trying to maintain order. The second impact came almost immediately, another missile slamming into the right wing. Metal screeched and groaned as alarms blared from the cockpit. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, but this time it was raw, desperate. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've sustained critical damage. We are beginning emergency descent procedures. Flight crew, brace for impact." The airliner shuddered violently, dropping altitude. Passengers sobbed, clutching their children, praying aloud. Fear surged like a wave, drowning the cabin. But Sophia, battle-tested and trained to act when seconds mattered, knew one thing: she could not sit idly by. The intercom cracked again, this time the head flight attendant's trembling voice. "Is there anyone on board with aviation experience? We need assistance in the cockpit immediately." Sophia unbuckled her seat belt without hesitation. The aisle tilted under her feet as the plane lurched, but she steadied herself, moving past panicked hands that reached out for reassurance. She could hear fragments of pleas. "What's happening? Are we going to crash?" But she didn't stop. She kept walking forward. "I'm a pilot," Sophia said firmly when she reached the front. "I can help them fly it." The attendant's eyes widened. For a moment, doubt flickered across her face. Sophia was young, dressed as a civilian, her words competing against the chaos. But then the urgency of the situation left no room for hesitation. "Follow me," the attendant said, pulling her toward the cockpit door. Sophia drew a steadying breath as alarms wailed louder from behind the reinforced door. She was about to step into a different kind of battle, one where 200 lives depended not on missiles or dogfights, but on her ability to bring a dying aircraft safely to Earth. And this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. The reinforced cockpit door swung open, and Sophia was hit with a blast of noise, alarm screaming, warning lights flashing across every panel. The air smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Inside, Captain Robert Mitchell and First Officer Emma Lawson were fighting desperately with the controls. Both were pale and bleeding, their uniforms torn where flying debris had cut into them. Sweat beaded on Robert's forehead as he wrestled with a yoke that no longer responded as it should. Emma's hands trembled as she switched frantically between failing systems, trying to salvage what remained of their crippled aircraft. Robert's voice cracked as he spoke, his eyes never leaving the trembling instruments. "We've lost both engines. Hydraulics are barely responding. We're not going to hold her for long." Emma's voice was tight, controlled but heavy with dread. "Flight controls are sluggish. Nothing's behaving the way it should." Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Captain Mitchell, First Officer Lawson. I'm Sophia Reynolds, United States Air Force. Qualified on multiple aircraft types, combat experienced. I can help you." The two pilots glanced at her, disbelief flashing for a moment. In the middle of disaster, it was hard to place faith in a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. But the urgency of their situation left no time for doubt. Emma wiped blood from her brow, her eyes narrowing. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Sophia answered firmly. "I've trained for catastrophic system failures in hostile skies. Right now, your best chance is letting me help." Robert hesitated, his hands gripping the controls like lifelines. He could feel the jet shuddering beneath him, every vibration screaming that the aircraft was minutes from breaking apart. Then he looked at Sophia again. Her stance was calm, her gaze sharp, her voice filled with authority. She didn't sound like a passenger desperate to survive. She sounded like a professional who had been here before. Different skies, different aircraft, but the same mortal stakes. "Fine," Robert said at last, his voice hoarse. "You've got the controls." Sophia slid into the pilot's seat beside him, strapping herself in as quickly as possible. Her fingers flew across the panel, assessing what systems remained and which were lost. Both engines were gone, she confirmed immediately. Hydraulic pressure was bleeding out. Electrical systems were erratic. They had maybe 15 minutes of controllable flight left, if luck held. "Emma," Sophia said sharply, "start coordinating with the cabin crew. Prepare passengers for a hard landing, brace positions, evacuation procedures. Robert, stay with me on the instruments. I need your support on secondary controls." Both pilots nodded, their training locking back into place now that Sophia had asserted command. The fear in their eyes remained, but it was tempered by a renewed sense of focus. Sophia tapped the navigation display, narrowing in on their options. "We won't reach JFK. Nearest commercial airport is beyond glide range." But her eyes scanned the tactical overlay. "There's a military installation 180 miles northeast. Long runway, emergency facilities. Within reach if we optimize glide path. That's our best chance." Robert frowned. "Military field? We don't have clearance." I do, Sophia replied. It's MacDill Air Base. I've flown in and out dozens of times. With your permission, I'll take her in. Emma bit her lip, staring at the chaos around them. You really think you can land this bird with no engines, failing hydraulics, and 200 passengers strapped in behind us? Sophia turned her gaze on her, calm but unflinching. I don't think. I know. But only if we act now. The decision hung heavy in the air for a moment. Then Robert exhaled sharply and nodded. Do it. She's yours. Sophia tightened her grip on the yoke, steadying the aircraft as it bucked against failing systems. She shifted her mindset from passenger to pilot, every fiber of her training roaring to life. She had practiced dead-stick landings countless times in simulators, scenarios where everything went wrong and survival seemed impossible. She remembered the instructors hammering the lesson. Impossible doesn't mean hopeless. Think, adapt, act. She opened the comms, switching frequencies. MacDill Tower, this is United Flight 981 declaring emergency. Civilian Boeing 767, catastrophic system damage. Both engines gone, multiple failures. 200 souls on board. Request immediate emergency clearance. Pilot in command is Air Force Captain Sophia Reynolds. Static filled the channel for a heartbeat before a sharp reply cut through. United 981, MacDill Tower copies. Emergency equipment being positioned. You are cleared for immediate approach to runway 06. Winds calm. Visibility unlimited. We'll talk you down. Sophia nodded, her pulse steady despite the enormity of what she faced. She turned to Robert. You handle comms with the cabin. Make sure everyone is braced for worst case. Emma, help me manage what's left of hydraulics. We're going to need every ounce of control to make this work. The jet groaned again, dropping altitude faster than Sophia liked. She adjusted, coaxing the crippled machine to respond. Through the windshield, smoke trailed from what remained of the wings. The once mighty engines now burned uselessly, their silence a haunting contrast to the screaming alarms. Passengers will be bracing in 2 minutes, Emma reported, her voice steadying as she worked. Good, Sophia said. Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, on the faint line where sky met earth. It was a pilot's instinct to look forward, to the runway, to survival. Fear could come later. For now, there was only the fight to keep the aircraft aloft long enough to bring 200 lives safely home. And Sophia Reynolds had never walked away from a fight. The cabin lights flickered as the crippled Boeing 767 continued to shudder under the strain. Smoke curled faintly from the vents, filling the air with the acrid bite of burning insulation. Somewhere in the cabin, a child was crying uncontrollably, and the sounds of whispered prayers mingled with frantic sobs. Behind the reinforced cockpit door, Sophia Reynolds focused on a single goal, bringing the wounded jet to Earth without tearing it apart. Her eyes darted across the instrument panel. Altitude, dropping faster than ideal. Airspeed, dangerously inconsistent. Hydraulics, fluctuating but not gone. She tightened her grip on the yoke, speaking firmly into the intercom. MacDill Tower, United 981. We're on emergency descent, heading for runway 06. Total engine failure, minimal hydraulics. I'll be attempting dead-stick landing. Copy, United 981. The tower responded. Runway is clear. Emergency crews are standing by. You have priority. Robert, still pale from blood loss, but resolute, managed the radios, relaying information to the flight attendants. Emma fought with the hydraulic systems, nursing what little responsiveness remained from the ailerons and elevators. The teamwork inside the cockpit was frantic but coordinated, each second stretching like an eternity. Sophia adjusted their descent angle. Every movement was calculated with precision. Too steep, and the jet would hit the ground short of the runway. Too shallow, and it would stall before reaching MacDill. She thought back to her training days in simulators, the instructors drilling into her head. Fly the plane until the last second. Never surrender control. Never give up airspeed until the ground is beneath you. Through the cockpit windows, she spotted the faint glint of MacDill's runway lights in the distance. Relief flickered, but it was far too soon to relax. I've got visual on the field, she announced. Adjusting glide path. Everyone stay with me. In the cabin, the lead flight attendant's voice quivered over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please assume brace position. Keep your seat belts fastened. Remain calm and follow crew instructions." The words were steady, professional, but passengers could feel the dread in every syllable. Many were already hunched forward, arms braced, eyes closed, lips whispering last words they feared might be their final ones. Back in the cockpit, alarms screamed louder. Hydraulic pressure dipped again, making the yoke sluggish and heavy. Sophia gritted her teeth, fighting to keep the nose aligned with the glowing path of runway 06. Sweat traced a line down her cheek, but her voice remained calm. "Emma, give me everything you've got on stabilizers." Robert called the tower, confirmed fire crews along both sides. "Confirmed," Robert said quickly. "They're ready." The descent steepened. The aircraft trembled violently, airframe protesting as Sophia adjusted for crosswinds. She pulled gently, easing the nose, balancing between stall and speed. The ground rushed closer, the runway growing wider in the windshield. This was the most dangerous part, the final seconds when a crippled jet either obeyed or betrayed its pilot. 200 feet, Emma called out. "Hold steady," Sophia murmured. She eased the yoke, coaxing the heavy aircraft into alignment. 100 feet. The runway lights blazed now, bright against the darkening horizon. Every muscle in Sophia's arms burned from the effort of holding the controls steady. 50 feet. "Brace," Robert shouted over the intercom. The impact came with a bone-rattling jolt. Tires screamed against asphalt, the aircraft bouncing once, then slamming down hard. The landing gear groaned under the weight, but it held. Sophia immediately deployed every brake system still functional, her feet slamming on pedals as she worked the rudder to keep the jet straight. Emergency vehicles lit up the sides of the runway, red and blue strobes flashing as fire crews chased alongside. The plane screeched, skidding slightly, then steadied. Sparks sprayed from beneath one failing wheel assembly, but Sophia kept her focus. "Stay with me," she whispered to the machine. "Just a little farther." 7,000 feet down the 11,000-foot runway, the 767 finally slowed to a grinding halt. Smoke poured from the wings where fuel lines had ruptured, but there were no flames yet. Sophia exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Tower, United 981. Aircraft stopped. 200 souls on board, all alive. Cheers erupted in the tower. On the ground, emergency crews swarmed the jet, spraying foam across its wings to prevent fire, ladders rushing to the exits. Inside the cabin, passengers burst into sobs of relief, clapping through tears, some shouting prayers of gratitude. They had survived the impossible. Sophia unbuckled her harness, her muscles trembling from adrenaline. "Get them evacuated," she said. Robert nodded weakly, his voice cracking as he relayed commands to the cabin. Within minutes, doors opened and slides deployed. Passengers poured out into the night, many falling to their knees once they touched the runway, kissing the ground they feared they'd never see again. Sophia stepped out of the cockpit at last. Dozens of wide, tear-streaked faces turned to look at her. To them, she wasn't just another passenger anymore. She was the reason they were alive. Yet she offered no words of pride, no speech of triumph. She simply directed them toward safety, moving down the aisle with the calm assurance of someone trained to put others before herself. Outside, as the last of the evacuees reached safety, a voice called from the chaos. Colonel Michael Hayes, MacDill's base commander, strode forward in uniform, his expression etched with awe. "Captain Reynolds," he said loudly over the roar of emergency vehicles. "Outstanding performance under impossible conditions. You saved 200 lives tonight." Sophia met his gaze, exhaustion pulling at her body. She gave a faint nod. "Sir, I just did what I was trained to do." But in her heart, she knew it was more than training. It had been instinct, courage, and the refusal to give up when lives hung in the balance. And as emergency crews secured the jet, Sophia realized her leave was over. Peace would have to wait. The sky was calling her back into service. The night after the landing at MacDill Air Base, Sophia Reynolds sat alone in a dimly lit room provided by the military. The base was quiet now, though she could still hear faint echoes of emergency vehicles outside. The adrenaline that had carried her through the impossible had faded, leaving her with heavy limbs and a pounding headache. She should have been on her way home, preparing to hug her parents, laugh with her brother, and sleep in a familiar bed. Instead, she found herself staring at the sterile walls of a debriefing chamber. Her vacation dissolved into smoke and fire. A secure phone on the desk rang. Sophia picked it up, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Captain Reynolds." "Captain, this is General Patricia Monroe, Air Combat Command," came the firm voice on the other end. "I understand you had quite an eventful day." Sophia leaned back in her chair, eyes closing briefly. "Yes, ma'am. Flight 981 was attacked by surface-to-air missiles. Both engines destroyed, systems compromised. We managed to land safely at MacDill. All passengers survived." The line was silent for a moment before the general spoke again, her tone harder now. "Intelligence confirms those missiles were launched by the same terrorist network we've been tracking for months. They're targeting civilian aircraft to spread chaos and fear. And after today, we can no longer sit back. We need pilots with your expertise, Captain. Effective immediately, you are recalled to active duty." Sophia opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling. She had known this moment was coming the second she stepped into that cockpit. Her vacation was finished before it had even begun. She straightened in her seat. "Understood, General. When do you need me?" "Report to Langley Air Force Base within 24 hours. You'll receive classified briefings and be assigned to a task force focused on eliminating this network. These missions won't be easy. They'll require precision, creativity, and the ability to operate under pressure. That's why you've been chosen." Sophia's answer came without hesitation. "I'll be ready." The next day, she was airborne again, this time in a military transport jet carrying her back to the world she had thought she'd left behind, at least for a short while. At Langley, she walked into a secure briefing room filled with officers and analysts. Maps spread across digital screens, satellite images frozen mid-zoom. Around the table sat men and women who had spent months piecing together fragments of intelligence, arms shipments, encrypted communications, and suspicious movements across borders. General Monroe stood at the head of the table. "Captain Reynolds, your role will be central. You faced this enemy firsthand. Now we're taking the fight back to them." A map of the Mediterranean lit up on the main screen. Red markers dotted the coastlines. "These cells have acquired advanced missile systems, Russian design, smuggled through black channels. Their objective is clear: disrupt international air travel, erode public confidence, and make governments look powerless. They are mobile, well-funded, and ruthless. We cannot allow them to continue." Sophia studied the display, her jaw tightening. She could still hear the panic cries of passengers, see the flames curling off broken wings. Those memories were no longer just scars. They were fuel. Over the following weeks, she trained relentlessly in modified F-16s equipped with advanced sensors and precision weapons. The aircraft had been adapted for counterterrorism operations, stealth coatings, enhanced targeting pods, electronic warfare suites. Every mission simulated was designed around unpredictability. Mobile launchers hidden in deserts, clandestine convoys moving under the cover of civilian traffic, urban strikes where collateral damage had to be avoided at all costs. Her squadron was small but elite, a handpicked group of pilots who had faced the worst skies on Earth. Among them was John Wallace, a veteran with a sharp wit, and Emma Lawson, recovered from her cockpit injuries and assigned to the task force as an intelligence liaison. Their bond had been forged in fire at 37,000 feet, and seeing Emma alive and walking the halls of Langley gave Sophia a quiet sense of strength. The first operation launched under cover of darkness. Sophia's F-16 roared into the night, the sky alive with stars above the Mediterranean. Her target, a convoy transporting missile components through hostile territory. Intelligence suggested the weapons were destined for another civilian strike within days. She gripped the stick tightly, eyes scanning her heads-up display. "Task Force 1, this is Viper 1. Visual on convoy. Confirm coordinates." Command replied swiftly, Coordinates confirmed. Weapons free. Take them out before they cross the border. Sophia rolled her jet into a dive, the earth rushing up toward her. The convoy appeared below, several trucks escorted by armed vehicles. She locked her sensors, thumb hovering over the release. For a moment, she thought of the passengers on Flight 981, the fear in their eyes, the prayers whispered into oxygen masks. Then she pressed the button. Precision munitions streaked downward, finding their marks with brutal accuracy. Fireballs erupted along the convoy's path, shattering the trucks and scattering debris across the desert. Secondary explosions confirmed missile components destroyed. Sophia pulled up hard, the force slamming her back into her seat as the night sky swallowed her again. "Target neutralized," she reported, her voice calm but resolute. Cheers erupted in her headset as her wingmen confirmed. But Sophia didn't smile. She knew this was only the beginning. Every convoy destroyed meant another cell out there plotting harder, moving deeper underground, waiting for their chance to strike back. When she landed hours later, her squadron celebrated, but Sophia walked quietly to the hangar doors, gazing into the night. The enemy wasn't just a group of armed men with missiles. It was fear itself, the kind of fear that made families hesitate to fly, that turned peaceful skies into hunting grounds. She knew she wouldn't rest until that fear was buried. The war she had stepped into wasn't about borders or glory. It was about ensuring that no parent had to clutch their child on a falling plane. No passenger had to whisper a final prayer. Sophia Reynolds had once been a passenger caught in an ambush. Now she was the hunter. Months passed in a blur of sorties, intelligence briefings, and tense operations. The terrorist network Sophia Reynolds and her task force hunted was more resilient than expected, with cells scattered across deserts, mountains, and coastal towns. Each strike revealed another layer of complexity. Financiers hidden behind shell companies, couriers crossing borders under false identities, local allies shielding missile stockpiles in civilian zones. But Sophia had changed too. Each mission sharpened her resolve. The faces of Flight 981's passengers stayed with her, terrified families, trembling hands clutching oxygen masks, prayers whispered into chaos. They were her anchor, her reminder that this fight was about more than strategy and weapons. It was about people who would never know her name, but whose lives depended on her. By the 5th month, the task force had dismantled most of the network. Dozens of launchers were destroyed, warehouses leveled, convoys stopped mid-route. Yet the leadership remained elusive, slipping like shadows across borders. Then intelligence finally revealed their stronghold, a heavily fortified compound in a remote valley, guarded by radar systems and anti-air defenses. Hidden within were advanced missiles capable of striking aircraft at long range. If left intact, it would cripple international aviation for years. General Monroe's voice was sharp during the briefing. This is their last sanctuary. Destroy it, and the network collapses. Fail, and they regroup. Captain Reynolds, you'll lead the strike package. We're trusting you to end this. Sophia nodded. She felt the weight of responsibility settle across her shoulders. Heavy but familiar. She had carried heavier burdens before. On that day when she guided a dying Boeing 767 safely onto MacDill's runway. This mission was different only in scale. That night, the squadron lifted off into a moonless sky. Their aircraft glinted faintly against the starlight as they sped toward hostile airspace. Sophia's call sign, Viper 1, echoed across the channel. Stay tight. We only get one chance. Enemy radars lit up almost immediately, sweeping the skies. The valley ahead glowed faintly on her display. Dozens of vehicles, heat signatures of armed guards, hardened bunkers hiding missiles. Sophia steadied her breathing, guiding her jet into attack position. Task force, break formation. Suppression of enemy air defenses, now. Her wingmen unleashed electronic jammers and decoys, confusing radars and forcing enemy operators into frantic countermeasures. Surface-to-air missiles fired blindly, streaking skyward, only to detonate harmlessly in empty air. In the chaos, Sophia dove toward the valley, her targeting pod locking onto the compound. Target acquired, she announced. Her thumb hovered over the release. For a heartbeat, the cockpit fell silent, the world holding its breath. Then she pressed the trigger. Precision munitions fell like thunderbolts. Explosions erupted across the valley, tearing apart bunkers, fueling stations, and missile containers. Flames shot high into the night, illuminating mountains with a violent glow. Secondary detonations confirmed direct hits, fuel tanks igniting, missiles cooking off in brilliant streaks. Enemy fighters scrambled from a hidden strip nearby, but Sophia was already climbing, her wingmen intercepting with practiced precision. Dogfights raged briefly across the dark sky, missiles streaking, flares burning. But the enemy was disorganized, their command shattered. Within minutes, their aircraft fell silent, consumed by fire or retreating into the night. Compound destroyed, Sophia reported, her voice steady. All missile stockpiles eliminated. Cheers erupted across the calms, but she remained composed. Victory was not about celebration. It was about the silence that followed, the absence of threats that once stalked civilians through the skies. When the squadron returned to base at dawn, General Monroe met them on the tarmac. "Outstanding work," she said. "This network is finished. Civilian aviation is safe for now." Sophia saluted, but her expression was calm, almost distant. She knew safety was never permanent. Somewhere, someone would always try to turn the sky into a battlefield. Her duty was to be ready when they did. Weeks later, reports confirmed the truth. The network had collapsed completely, its leaders killed or captured, its funding severed. International airspace returned to routine. Families boarded flights without hesitation, children pressing faces to windows, unaware of the danger that had once loomed unseen. The world exhaled, never knowing how close it had come to disaster. Sophia walked alone across the flight line one evening, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold. Her F-16 gleamed in the fading light, scarred from missions, but still standing, like her. She thought about Flight 981 again, how she had boarded as a passenger seeking rest, only to step into the cockpit and change 200 lives. That single act had rewritten her future. She remembered Robert Mitchell and Emma Lawson, the civilian pilots who had fought beside her that day. She remembered Colonel Hayes at MacDill, his words of praise. She remembered the faces of strangers who would never know who had saved them. And she remembered the voice of General Monroe, calling her back when rest had barely begun. Peace had been fleeting, but perhaps it was never meant for her. She was a guardian of skies, a protector unseen. Some lives were built for quiet comfort. Hers was built for storms. As the last rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Sophia whispered to herself, not as a boast, but as a promise. The sky will always be safe. Far away, families boarded flights bound for vacations, reunions, new beginnings. Children laughed, couples dreamed, elders rested peacefully in their seats. None of them knew the name Sophia Reynolds. None of them needed to. Her work was never about recognition. It was about ensuring they never felt the terror she had once faced. For Sophia, that was enough. She had started as a passenger on a doomed flight. She had become the pilot who refused to let it fall. And when the world needed her again, she had answered without hesitation, striking back against those who thought fear could rule the skies. The terrorists had believed they could murder innocents without consequence. They learned instead that when they threatened the helpless, they summoned warriors trained to hunt them down. Sophia Reynolds walked away from the flight line as night fell, her silhouette framed by the quiet strength of her jet. Her leave was long over. Her mission was endless. But as long as she flew, the skies would remain free.